Images flooded her mind. A ship cutting through foreign waters, waking without the weight of command, growing old in some distant market, selling silk to strangers who would never know her name. Behind her, the city slept fitfully, children pressed against mothers in hidden cellars. Her volunteer women clutched crossbows at their posts. Captain Yusuf patrolled walls, unaware his commander faced temptation that could unravel everything. The general's guard fingered his sword, growing nervous. Gulnar straightened her spine, decision crystallizing like winter ice. The jeweled dagger slipped back into its sheath, with a whisper of metal on leather. I have no sons left to shame with cowardice. Each word fell like stones into still water. No husband to disappoint with betrayal. Only these people who trusted a merchant's daughter with their lives. The general nodded once, something like approval flickering across his features. He spoke a single phrase before turning away. The interpreter translated with obvious reluctance. He says your death will be memorable. Not merciful, but memorable. The final assault came at dawn. Mongol siege engines had reduced the inner city to rubble, and now 50,000 warriors advanced through the breaches with patient efficiency. They had learned to respect these defenders who fought beyond reason, but respect wouldn't save anyone. The 3-day rule allowed no exceptions. Gulnar moved her command post 3 times as sectors fell. Each retreat marked territory permanently lost. The irregular women fighters had been scattered into desperate pockets, but they still contested every advance. A blood-covered woman stumbled into the command post carrying a Mongol head by its hair, trophy of some last stand. Her report came in gasps. The market square held for 6 hours. The baker's widow died on her feet, took 8 of them with her. She gripped Gulnar's wrist with surprising strength. Was it worth it? Did we matter? Every death mattered. Gulnar held the woman's gaze until it fixed on nothing. Every hour of defiance wrote history, but the words tasted hollow as the city burned around them. Perhaps 200 defenders remained, gathering at the governor's palace for the final stand. The women volunteers numbered less than 40. Many bore wounds. All carried the exhaustion of impossible resistance. General Karim found her in the afternoon, his left arm hanging useless. The Mongols mass for a final push. We have, perhaps, hours. She nodded, touching the jeweled dagger that had become her constant companion. Gather whoever remains. We make our stand here. Let them work for every room. The retreat to the palace became a fighting withdrawal through streets she had walked. As a young bride, past the silk market where she had learned to haggle, through squares where her sons had played, each familiar landmark bore scars of conquest. Inside the palace walls, the last defenders gathered. These people had followed a silk merchant's daughter into hopeless battle. They had seen their city burn rather than submit. Now they would write the final chapter. Gulnar addressed them from the same steps where her husband once held court. The Mongols offer no quarter now. We've cost them too much for mercy. But we've also proved something they didn't expect. Otrar dies on its feet, not its knees. A ragged cheer answered her. They had transformed from merchants and housewives into something the Mongols hadn't anticipated. Warriors who understood that some choices echo longer than life. The Mongol assault began at sunset, advancing room by room through the palace complex. Each chamber became a battlefield. Each corridor cost lives. Defenders sold ground dearly. Understanding this was their last currency. Gulnar commanded from the central tower until flames forced her back. She fell through halls, where she had raised 3 sons, past chambers, where her husband had worried over the very defenses now serving their grim purpose. In the deepest cellars, the last volunteers waited among oil stores and grain reserves. When she gave the command, they spread oil and set sparks. Smoke began rising through palace floors. The Mongols would claim no prizes from Otrar's heart, only flame and defiance. The palace transformed into a torch visible for miles, consuming defenders and architecture alike. Gulnar climbed stairs already growing hot, the jeweled dagger finally drawn. Behind her, flames consumed stores that should have fed conquerors. Ahead, the palace's main hall, filled with Mongol warriors seeking the woman who had defied all convention. She emerged onto the balcony where this nightmare had begun. Below, the Mongol general waited with his troops. The scarred face showed no surprise at her appearance. Perhaps he had expected this final gesture from the woman who refused escape. "You could have lived," his words carried across the smoke-filled space. "Sailed to safety while your people burned. Why choose this?" She raised the dagger, its jewels catching firelight from below. The flames climbed faster now, turning the palace into an inferno. Her voice rang clear despite the smoke. "Because a merchant's daughter learned something you'll never understand. Some things matter more than living. Some choices echo longer than life." The general gestured to his archers, but she moved faster. The jeweled dagger that had once opened letters found its final purpose. As she fell, the palace erupted in flames behind her, consuming the last defenders who had chosen cremation over capture. Otrar burned through the night. The Mongols withdrew from the inferno, their systematic conquest transformed into something resembling defeat. They had taken the city, but at costs no one had calculated. 5,000 Mongol casualties for a city that should have cost 500. Worse, they had lost the prizes they expected. No women to distribute among warriors, no slaves to claim, only ashes and the memory of unprecedented defiance. The few survivors pulled from ruins would face public execution to demonstrate what happened to cities that resisted past 3 days. But Otrar had already won its victory, written in fire, and the transformed courage of women who chose weapons over chains. The story should have ended there, buried with the ashes. The Mongols employed thousands of scribes to record their conquests with meticulous detail, celebrating military genius while sanitizing horror into administrative data. These official chronicles might mention a stubborn defense to highlight Mongol prowess, but they rarely named defeated leaders. Heroes of failed rebellions offered dangerous inspiration, but memory proved harder to kill than cities. Some stories refused to die. Persian historians like Juvayni and Rashid al-Din chronicled the conquests from within. The empire, walking a razor's edge between serving Mongol rulers and honoring their own conquered peoples. They recorded the pyramids of skulls, documented the methodical sorting of populations, gave names to cities the Mongols had turned to dust. In remote villages and refugee camps, oral traditions carried fragments of truth. Whispers kept alive what had been lost. And the stories of female resistance proved especially resilient because they were so unusual, so shocking to patriarchal societies that they lodged in observers' memories. A woman commanding troops, a merchant's wife organizing city defense. These events violated every norm, demanding to be told even when they disrupted official narratives. Centuries later, scientists studying DNA across Asia would discover Gulnar's revenge written in human cells. That genetic marker, appearing in 16 million men, traced to Genghis Khan and his warriors, told a story of systematic rape on continental scale. The Mongol policy of eliminating male populations and distributing female survivors had worked with horrifying efficiency, permanently altering the genetic landscape of entire nations. But those same genetic studies revealed something the Mongols hadn't anticipated. The resistance, the stories, the choices made by women like Gulnar created ripples that outlasted the empire itself. In a dozen cities after Otrar, women whispered about the merchant's daughter who armed housewives, about defenders who chose their own endings, about a city that cost the conquerors more than calculated. The dual legal system that protected Mongol women while legitimizing violence against conquered women became a template for future atrocities. The three-day rule, the mechanical sorting of human beings, the systematic use of sexual violence as military strategy, these methods would be studied and imitated by later conquerors. The horror perfected on Central Asian plains became part of humanity's dark inheritance. Yet the legacy of defiance ran like a hidden current beneath official chronicles of glorious conquest. It proved that even facing annihilation, the human spirit could find ways to resist. The cost was absolute. Otrar was erased, its people scattered, its women never sorted because they chose death over distribution. But that choice itself became victory of a different kind. Gulnar's transformation from silk merchant to war leader demonstrated that courage wore no gender. Her refusal of the general's unprecedented offer to escape showed that some principles mattered more than survival. Her decision to arm women and let them choose their endings challenged the fundamental assumptions of conquest. The jeweled dagger that ended her life became symbol of agency reclaimed in the face of systematic dehumanization. The Mongol Empire eventually crumbled, as all empires do. But the stories survived in whispers, in foreign accounts, in the silent testimony of ruins. Today, when we study the genetic evidence of mass rape across Asia, when we examine the archaeological remains of sorted populations, when we read the clinical records of administrative horror, we must also remember the other story. The story of women who refused to be numbers in conquerors' ledgers, who rejected the role of passive victims, who proved that even when you lose everything, you can still choose how you're remembered. Gulnar and Otrar's defenders didn't stop the Mongol advance. They didn't save their city, but they forced one of history's most efficient killing machines to remember that some victories cost more than defeat. That's the warning carved into both genetic markers and historical fragments. Systems of oppression, no matter how perfectly engineered, cannot completely erase human dignity. Terror can conquer cities, but it cannot conquer the choice to resist. The mathematics of massacre can sort populations, but it cannot calculate the value of dying on your feet instead of living on your knees. If this history shook you, don't let it disappear into algorithm obscurity. Subscribe to Medieval Survival right now, because there are more untold stories of resistance buried beneath conquerors' propaganda. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me which moment hit hardest: Gulnar refusing escape, women fighting with crossbows, or the genetic legacy revealing the true scale of Mongol violence. Share this with someone who needs to understand that courage has no gender and that some choices echo across centuries. The past wasn't romantic. It was brutal, calculated, and written in blood. But it was also filled with people who chose dignity over survival, and their stories deserve to be remembered.